All right, it's late October, so the time is right to start talking about some spooky stuff. I thought it'd be fun to quickly talk about horror music and see if we could make some eerie generative music in pure data. I was looking up some ideas online, and man, there are some weird sites out there on the internet. I recommend keeping your cookies off whenever possible and just being cognizant about your web security. Anyway, there's no one-size-fits-all for horror, and actually making music for horror can be a really freeing experience. One of my favorite soundtracks is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the composer Wayne Bell says that he and the director really wanted to push the boundary between music and sound. So you end up with almost a kind of musique concrète score that helps convey the characters' mental states throughout the film. A different approach, in The Shining, Stanley Kubrick just took dissonant contemporary classical music by Bartók and Ligeti and patchworked these concert pieces into something different to support the action of the film. The Exorcist theme, too, was originally called Tubular Bells and was a minimalist work by Mike Oldfield before becoming the iconic theme for the film. You can hear some similarities to Tubular Bells in the synth-heavy scores that John Carpenter wrote for his films, including the iconic theme for the 1978 film Halloween. Now, as I said, there are lots of things that can make music scary, and part of the fun of horror is the license to be a bit experimental. Because of the tools we're working with today, specifically pure data and synthesis, let's take a page from Oldfield and Carpenter's music and make a patch that can generate their kind of dissonant music in odd time signatures. If I'm being totally honest, the horror theme is just an excuse to talk about generative music in pure data. Whenever we make a generative system, we have to think about what we want to control and what we want to leave up to chance. So, thinking about John Carpenter-y horror music, I want something that's pulsed, but in an odd time signature, and something that's dissonant, but repetitive. So with those goals in mind, let's get started. So as I've done before, I'm going to use pure data to play Contact as a MIDI instrument. So pure data is just going to be doing the work with MIDI, and then all of the synthesis, all of the sound is going to come out through Contact. Of course, we could do all of our sound design in PD too, but since in this video I want to focus on the generative music part, I want to simplify the sound design a little bit. This Analog Dream sampler that I have up is free. You can get it from the Native Instruments site. And it's a sort of nice retro synth, and again, if we're trying to evoke John Carpenter, this might be a good choice. I have two instances of it here. One is listening on MIDI channel 1, one is listening on MIDI channel 2. For now, here's what that channel 1 on a movie set patch sounds like. That's just me reaching over and plunking on my keyboard. All right, so let's hop over to PD. New. And the way that we are going to get sound out is we're going to be using our make note. Command 1, make note. Velocity, we'll just do 100 for the moment. Note length, for now let's do 200. And then this has to run, Command 1, to a note out. You want to make sure that you connect your velocities too. I'm just going to add this 1 here. So this note out 1 means it'll be sending to the contact instrument that's listening on channel 1. Command 2 for a message, just to test it out. 60. It's working. If I were to go over here and do 2 instead, that's sending to our contact instrument that's listening on channel 2. All right, that works. Set it back to channel 1. Now let's Shift Command T, toggle, Command 1, metro. We'll set this at 200 milliseconds for the moment. Shift Command B, always nice to have a place so we can see what's going on with our metro, can help us troubleshooting if we ever run into problems. And then, of course, I could do this. Actually, that could be a pretty good horror score in and of itself, but not terribly dynamic over time. Let's set up our counter. So Command 1, F stores the float. Command 1 plus 1. And remember, this stores the float. This adds 1 to the float that's in there. And so if we go Command 3 and look at a number that's coming out of that, wire it up to our metro, and go. Now we've got something that's just going to count up forever. If you want to see this in a little bit more detail, you can check out my Pure Data 2 video where I talk through this a little bit slower. Okay? Command 1, modulo 5, and then we'll add a number to see what's coming out of that. Now this modulo gives the remainder of this number when it's divided by this number. So basically what we've ended up with is a counter that keeps counting up from 1 to 5. Now I've chosen 5 here, kind of arbitrarily, but again, we're making horror music. Let's use an odd time signature. I believe the Halloween theme is either in 5 or 10. I don't know how John Carpenter thinks about it. There's probably an interview. Maybe I'll cut in an image of it here. But regardless, it's this asymmetry of the time signature that might contribute to this feeling of unease. So now that we have this counting up, we'll use a select and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I almost did 5 there, but it doesn't count up to 5. Stretch this out. Shift Command B for our bang or button. Command D to duplicate it. And so now we have the start of our sequencer. Now let's have it trigger different notes. I'm kind of choosing arbitrary notes here, but I'm intentionally choosing ones that I think will be spookier. And the way I'm doing that is I'm thinking in minor, I'm thinking about half steps, I'm thinking about dissonance. Let's do a tritone there. And then a major 7, which would be 71. Okay, so that's a pretty good sequencer. There's nothing generative about this yet because I haven't really left anything up to chance or and every time I open this up, it will play the exact same thing. So now we have this metro counting. Instead of always playing this lick starting on 60, I want to set it up so I can choose different notes to start this lick on. So let's rethink this a moment. There's our number. Command 1, let's make another place to store a float, and then we'll bang this float out with our same metro. Now, this isn't going to be our counter. This is going to be a pitch that we can set here. So then all we do is we add these. But now, instead of the absolute pitches, instead of 60 and 61 and 63 and all those, I'm going to think about their relative pitches. Let me explain what I mean by that. So that's 0. Relatively, that was 1 away. Relatively, that was 3. Relatively, that was 6. Relatively, that was 11. And so now if I start this metro, and so now I can choose where the root of that lick is. Okay? So then all we have to do is, let's say, every time we reach a 0, Command 1, random 12. So that's one of the 12 pitch classes, C through B. And then what we'll do is add 36. And then do that. So now, every time it goes through the pattern, when it comes back to 0, it'll choose a new root. Okay, that's not very interesting yet. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say, okay, if it changes every single time it goes through, we're not getting that repetition that we want. So let's do another random. And this time, a random number 0 through 9. I'm going to use a Moses here. What Moses does is it divides signals. So just to quickly show what's going on here, I'm going to add a number. So again, this will bang out every time we come to here. I apologize for my crossed wires. Maybe I'll do this over here for the moment. So we can see the random number that's coming out here. Command B, Command B. So if it's less than 1, as in 0, it's going to bang out here. Otherwise, it's going to bang out here. Let's set this Moses to 5, for example. 9, 6, 2 goes that way, 3 goes that way, 2 goes that way. So if I set this Moses to be 1, now I have a 1 in 10 chance of banging here, and then I could send that back. So it only has a 1 in 10 chance of the chord changing, the root changing, the root of this lick changing. Now I could increase that to a 1 in 5 chance, right? Let's clean this up a little bit. So what we can do now is let's just take this, put it over here, whoops, put it over here, and let's add to this Command 1, send, S for send, pulse. And so now, rather than having all these crossed wires, I can set a receive for the pulse, and this will just send the pulse to wherever I need it. Duplicate. And then Command 1, send 0, bink, Command D, receive 0. All right. Every time it hits a 0, picks a random number 1 through 5. If it's 1 or greater, nothing happens. If that number is a 0, this gets banged and it'll choose a new root, which will then be added to 36. So we'll get a number 36 to 47. A 1 in 5 chance might be a little bit too much, but we can fine tune this as we go. Okay, that's neat. What if we made a way to randomize the tempo? So let's make a big old button here. And you can change the button size by going to Properties, Size, 100. Okay, so that really is a big old button. Command 1, send, randomize. We'll just leave it at randomize for now, but let's duplicate this. Receive randomize. And the way we would do this is we would go and pick a random number. Now we got to think about what range of milliseconds for the metro we want. So let's do 150, and then let's add 150. So this gives me a random range from 150 to 300. So if I Command 3 here, let's hit this a few times. 215, 156, 237, 183. Now I will admit that I cheated a bit and tried to decide on some good tempos ahead of time. This was a pretty good range, but there are lots more options. We could make this much broader. So now we have this number, which is going to be our tempo. Again, not our tempo in beats per minute, but our tempo in milliseconds. I can take this and send pulse length. Okay, so I'm going to send this up now to my metro. Receive pulse length. But then I'm also going to send it right here. Now this is the length of those notes. So now metro was 200, the length of each note was 200 milliseconds. But now if the length of each pulse is 251 milliseconds, the pulse length will also get that. Hit the randomize. Let's check it out. Okay, we're getting there. I don't like how it's all in this sort of bassy range. So we currently have something that's randomly choosing our root, right? So we're choosing between 0 and 12 and then adding that to 36. I could easily make this 48. Let's see what that does. Let's trigger it once. Let's also take our randomize. And every time I hit that button, let's get a new root too. So I don't know about you, but this is sounding okay, but I'm getting pretty sick of that lick that I came up with. So let's randomize that too. Instead now of all of these message boxes with numbers in them, I'm going to replace those all with Fs. So again, our Fs are storing the floats. We've used this for our counter. We've used this to store our roots. But now we're going to store those relationships. So right now, these all have nothing in them, so we need to store. So let's make something that'll do that. Let's receive the randomize. So again, this is the trigger. When we hit this button, it'll come into this randomize here. When we have that, we'll choose a random number from 0 to 12. Now I put in 13 there. I chose 0 to 12 because that means it might repeat the root an octave above. And musically, that makes some sense to me. Okay, let's add a number box so we can look at that. And then we've got to send it. Send ARP1. Actually, let's send ARP2. Because now that I think about it, I don't want this to be an F, right? We want it to always start on the root. So let's set this back to being just a message at 0. So then this is going to be the ARP2, Command D, bring it over here. Always notice that when I set up the receive, I change it to an R. We're getting a little bit crowded here. We might give ourselves a bit more room in just a second. Command D, Command D. And I'm going to rename all of these in just a second. I just want to get them set up. So this one will receive ARP3, ARP4, ARP5. Take this, Command D, Command D, Command D, 2, 3, 4, 5. Randomize. So now, well, let's listen to it. Okay, let's hit the randomize again. That's not very spooky. Ooh. Okay, so when we get to 0, there's a 1 in 5 chance that we'll start a new chord. What if every time it had a new chord, there was a 1 in 10 chance that it re-triggered the randomize? So this would be pretty uncommon. I can make this more likely. Let's make it even more likely. Every time the chord changes, now there's a 50-50 chance that it'll randomize and change the arpeggio and change the tempo. Didn't happen that time. Ah, there we go. All right, let's make that less common again. All right. So if you know the Halloween theme like I know the Halloween theme, you know that what we're missing now are long sustained notes. Let's just change this to send randomize, right? And so we won't see it pop in that button, but it'll still send out that. So we already have a counter going, but now we just need longer notes. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to add another modulo, command 1, modulo, and this time I'm going to do 29. That's a weird number, huh? Part of the reason that I'm doing such an odd number is I don't want it divisible by 5 because I want it sort of moving out of sync with that. So it won't trigger at each time I hit a 0, it'll trigger at different parts of this arpeggio. I'm going to stretch this out all the way here for the moment, and then I'm going to go command 1, select 0. So this now will only trigger, shift command B, every 29 beats, every time it comes back to something that's divisible by 29. And so then what we can do is we can take this note. Actually, let's take this F. So when that, we'll make sure that, oh, actually, let's not even do that. Let's have this be that note. And then we're triggering that. So this just means, again, I've put that into the right inlet. So that's going to set the value of that F based on this, our root, plus where we are in the arpeggio. And then what we want to do is send our make note. A couple of things to change. Note out to 2, channel 2. I've set that up to be a pad. And we can, of course, play with different things. Let's take our pulse length, but let's also take our pulse length and multiply it by 29, because we want these notes to be longer. Hit my randomize button. Let's see what we got. I have no idea what caused that big chord there. If you see it, I'm a bit stumped about that. And I mean that with no Halloween sarcasm. I have no idea about that, but I'm gonna guess maybe there was some communication issue between PD and Contact or something like that. But hey, that's pretty neat. That works. My patch is a bit of a mess here. Let me show you my cleaned up version that I had at the beginning. Okay, let's look through this just a moment. This is mostly the same thing, but cleaned up. And things are in different places. Here's our metronome. I've labeled it here. That's what's doing our pulse. It's getting the pulse length. I have this randomize button. I separated the randomize and the change root here. The change root sends out to... It sends out to a couple places. Oh, here we go. So the change root sends to here, which again, I've kind of done this in a slightly different way. I choose the pitch class, and then I also choose the transposition. Again, I just picked a wider range of random numbers in the other patch, but I've done this in a slightly different way. These are just the same as what you saw in the other one. I called them ARP 2, 3, 4, 5. Change root also, again, this is where we have that 1 in 10 chance to randomize things, change the tempo, change the arpeggio, receive the pulse here. Here, this is the 29-beat system. Here, this is the 5-beat system. Same idea there. Selecting 0, instead of having one select, I could have just wired from this select to that random. I guess I just set up another select. Here I receive the pulse, I receive the root, right? So the change root, I've just separated that over and it sends over there. Adds the arpeggio to the root, and then sends that to our make note here. Now, this is a little bit more challenging to follow because we're sending a lot of things back up to the top of the patch, and it makes it a little bit harder to read than a regular patch. But we're not doing anything terribly more complicated here than we did in our simple sequencer. Now, once again, the horror is almost non sequitur. I'm taking advantage of the fact that it's hard and just picking random notes from the chromatic scale, both for the arpeggios and for the roots. If I wanted to make a generative system that was playing tonal music, I would probably change it so I was selecting notes from a scale rather than just from all 12 chromatic pitches. And then I might think about different choices with harmony. Again, maybe building harmony based on thirds. But here we have just a very simple generative system to make some fun seasonal music.